Dirt and Sprague Overtime YouTube edition, something we're going to try and start doing here a little bit more often after the show. Sometimes West Coast guests, they can't wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning. And so a little bit later, it's nice. And joining us now is our good buddy Ben Golliver, Washington Post national NBA writer, author of Bubble Ball and the Greatest of All Talk podcast, at Ben Golliver on Twitter. Ben, first off, great to see you, buddy. How was the quick trip back up to Portland? I know you're up here for the Hoop Summit. Was it good to be back in the old stomping grounds?
Oh, it was incredible, man. You had Danny Ainge, Masai Ujiri, Brad Stevens hanging out on the Lake Oswego High School basketball court bleachers. Those aren't very comfortable seats for the NBA bigwigs, all trying to watch Cooper Flagg at the Hoop Summit, man. It was great. Awesome week. The crazy part was there was two Blazers home games, and I didn't even go. That's kind of a weird feeling. Can't really remember the last time that was the case for me, but, clearly – the team's going through it right now, kind of a tough end of season slide. Didn't have a ton to play for down the stretch, and all the play-in stuff was wrapped up on the other side with the Warriors and the Rockets. So awesome weekend at home. Beat my mom in Scrabble. What more could you ask for?
Well, I think you learn coming home, even if it's a quick trip, that like you not going to the game is kind of becoming the norm for a lot of Blazer fans. I know we'll talk about that, but you being back and covering the Hoop Summit, Ben, could you help us? Because we're clearly in a position organizationally where they're probably not going to be very good. Next year's draft is supposed to be significantly better than this year's. You got to talk with Cooper Flagg, and I think we can all see it physically. We watch the highlights. We see some of the games. What was your takeaway just talking and interacting with Cooper Flagg? Because I think that's an underrated part when you start talking about franchise guys or cornerstones for organizations. He's so young, but what was your takeaway just like interacting with him?
Well, I think Dirt's background summarizes it perfectly. When it comes to next season, you guys are going to be flying the flag. That's going to be the mantra for the entire Portland Trail Blazers season. You guys are going to be crossing your fingers and praying you get the number one pick so that you can get this guy. I talked to Cooper a couple times after their practices. Very, very smart, engaging kid, in addition to being just an incredible basketball player. I got the chance to talk to his parents, too, actually, at the Moda Center for like half an hour. They were incredibly gracious with their times and really put a lot of interest in kind of backstory around his story so I can write about him a little bit better. I mean, the short version is he's going to be the greatest player from Maine of all time, and he pretty much already is at 17 years old. He showed up his freshman year at Maine High School, won the state championship, was basically the best player on the court, and looked around and said, now what, right? And so what we've seen him do these last couple of years is make three really ambitious decisions. So the first thing he did was go to Montverde Academy, which is like the new Oak Hill. It's kind of this basketball powerhouse. He went there because he wanted the best possible competition in practice and games. He wanted to go across the country, play against everybody, prove that he was the best, turn himself into the best possible player. His next decision was to reclassify. So he was so good, he's killing everybody in his class. He decides, you know what, skip a grade, basically. So now he's 17 years old coming into this whole process. At the Hoop Summit, I thought he was the best player in the gym, and he's a year younger than just about everybody else there. The third decision he took, and this is maybe the controversial one, quote unquote, he decides to go to Duke. That puts a pretty big target on his back, right? His parents actually told me, like, they had this family meeting where it's like, do you want to be the next hated white guy at Duke? Like, that's going to be who you are. And actually, his mom in college, she was a real hooper herself, and she wore number 32 because she liked Christian Laettner so much. So, this is this kind of thing where they're hardcore Celtics fans. He grew up kind of a Duke fan with this family. That's going to make you a target. That's going to make you a little bit polarizing. But he embraces all of it. And he just says, look, if Duke is the place that's going to put me on the best path to have a long, successful NBA career, that's where I want to go. So at each one of those decisions, you're seeing this kid, even though he's really young, trying to figure out how does he get to the mountaintop? How does he become the best version of himself? And the current player you see is incredibly polished on defense. He's going to be able to guard 1 through 4. He's got great footwork. He works super duper hard. He says one guy he studies is Jonathan Isaac, who's just a wrecking ball for the Orlando Magic on the defensive end. And on the offensive end, he puts up these massive numbers. He has great leaping ability. He's going to get you lots of dunks around the basket. He's improved his three-point shot. I don't know if he's going to be an alpha scorer in the NBA. I think maybe it's possible he's like a number 2 type scorer, but he's a guy who could shoot from the outside, maybe improve his handle just a little bit, but he'll grab a defensive rebound and go. And I think what really stands out more than anything is he's a culture setter, a tone setter because of his work ethic. He's the best player on the court, but he plays harder than everybody else. And his parents really raised him on old school fundamentals. They told him there is no other GOAT besides Michael Jordan. Okay, this is the standard that you have to kind of like live up to as a young kid. And he just wants to be coached hard. He wants to be a guy who's around winners, and that's what he cares about. Really, really impressive. Adam Silver had this comment recently saying like AAU system in America is falling behind the international system because the players play too much, they don't practice enough, and it kind of leaves them not being developed when they come to the NBA, and they have to learn all this stuff once they're in the NBA that they should have learned when they were teenagers. Cooper is the exact opposite of that. Like, he's got a very, very high floor as a player because he's so polished, well-rounded, and because he's been so focused on getting better. So he is the guy to save the Blazers. You guys missed out on Wemby by one lottery pick, and he's the next guy up. And so cross your fingers and pray.
I mean, we know how it's going to turn out, right? They're going to get the number 3 overall pick, and they're going to win too many games. Let me ask you about that, though, Ben, because I think that's my issue right now as a fan, is that it's like you got toes in each body of water, where you got this young group that you're trying to build around, and we know how important Scoot is and Shaden is, and then you have Jeremy Grant and Ayton and Anthony Simons and Malcolm Brogdon, and the fear is they're not going to be bad enough. Like, Detroit is all-time, but they won 14 games this year. They won the same amount of games as the Lions. Can we match that level of suctitude? Or like, do they have the wherewithal internally, you think, over at One Center Court to go all in that route? Because Chauncey Billups at exit interviews is saying we're pushing for a play-in game next year. Do you think they're really going to go that route? We know they're going to be bad, but can they be that bad next season?
Oh, I'm not worried about them being bad. I'm worried about them. When are they going to be good? You look at the West, it's going to be tougher. There's no question. I mean, Wemby is going to be pushing for the play-in tournament next year single-handedly, come hell or high water. I mean, they better find him some help, but regardless, they're going to be better. Houston's going to be in that mix. Some of these other teams are a little bit further along the developmental cycle with the Blazers. What I saw from Portland's veterans this season, in addition to a whole bunch of injuries, was not a lot of impacting winning, not a lot of driving victories. Sure, Ayton had some fancy numbers these last couple of months. He decided to show up at the season once it was over. Thanks, party's done. We needed you in October, buddy. I was not impressed at all by the way he finished, really. And it could have been worse. Obviously, it could have looked like he played in October, November, and December. And, clearly you're trying to find something to cling on to for optimism. But I don't think they have the veteran talent to drive wins. Clearly, Scoot is further behind than I expected. I thought it was going to be a rough review. I didn't think it was going to be quite that rough. And he showed a little bit of improvement down the stretch as well. I think they're going to be one of the worst teams in the NBA next year. I'm not trying to bury them, right? I just think that's an accurate assessment. And I don't know how they would get better. Look at this summer. They may want to be, cutting some salary a little bit, depending. They've got some really high-priced guys, and maybe they're going to be looking to make trades and accumulate future draft picks. I think it's really doubtful they're going to get an impact player in free agency or trades, right? Like, there's not going to be like a game-changing type guy coming. So I think you could safely say you're flying the flag next year, man. Start it now. Honestly, get on it early. You're going to look smart.
Yeah, we're playing capture the flag next year for sure. I actually really appreciate what you just said there, because I mean, it's almost kind of turned into everything is controversial to say like, hey, it's not that impressive that so-and-so did this. It's like, oh, come on, man. Like, the Ayton thing is spot on to me. Nice to see you produce, but the season's over at that point. You followed this team your whole life, and I know you're doing great things, dude, nationally. We couldn't be happier for you. And we are the Blazers, I think, in general, for somebody like you and what your job is, couldn't be further on the back burner of relevant topics to write or even think about. But you're familiar with the organization. You saw what this was when Paul was here. I feel like my takeaway from their exit interviews, their press conferences have largely been kind of mini disasters, if not outright disasters. It's, we're going to put our chips all in to build with Dame, and then we're going to draft a point guard, and we're not going to trade any of our picks. And then, we're going to have Scoot and Dame play together. Then we're going to trade Dame because we're going to force his hand to get out. And then you got Chauncey saying playing for play-in, while Joe is saying, our talent's not that great. We all kind of know what it is, but their messaging has been awful. And still to this day, we haven't heard one thing, not one, from Jody Allen. I don't have a lot of trust in the organization. And everybody cites like, you don't want to be the Pistons. Well, no, but if the Pistons get Cooper Flagg, you're going to get passed by the Pistons. And so my trust is wearing thin with them. What's your just 30,000, I don't really pay much attention view of your hometown Blazer? What's your view of the way the organization is kind of been the last couple of years?
Well, when you guys have staff meetings, do they let you run the meeting or does the boss run the meeting? Who talks? The boss,
Usually,
right?
usually the boss. Yeah.
Yeah, probably the head boss, right, or the deputy. So where's the head boss? I mean, that's really what it boils down to. And you see in the NBA right now, there are so many owners just trying to game every little possible edge. Right? Look at Steve Ballmer putting up a $2 or $3 billion arena in Inglewood just because he doesn't want to play games at 12:30 anymore at Staples and Crypto. He's just like annoyed that they have to play the afternoon games. They're like, all right, gonna make my own building, whatever. $3 billion, sure, no problem. I'm gonna pay cash for Madison Square Garden to Madison Square Garden for the Inglewood Forum just to kind of like remove them as an obstacle to his plan, right? Like there are so many incredibly rich, ambitious owners. This is their passion project. This is what they live and die by. And like you said, if that's how Jody Allen felt about the Blazers, she probably could have done one interview in the last 5 years, right? Like she maybe could have carved up some time to talk about her beloved team. One of my best memories about Paul Allen, frankly, not very many memories because he's walking around with Secret Service in every direction. You're not getting a lot of FaceTime with that guy, right? He's got more important things to do. Go on safaris in Africa and, take his, his submarine out and all that stuff. But he would always come to the preseason to, in the training camp to watch the team in person. And then he would give his takes, right? It's like, here's what we think we're going to be. And then at the end of the year, he would often do small scrums. Sometimes they do it in the back locker room, all dark there in the Moda Center, and it's kind of feel weird. And here's Paul Allen just laying down what he liked, what he didn't like, what's going to happen. Where is that? And if you don't have that kind of direction, what it ends up doing is creating these mixed messages that you're talking about, where everyone's trying to either guess what the boss wants because the boss isn't saying, or they're trying to keep all options open just in case things change. And you're getting a lot of procrastination, right? Especially with the Dame thing, just kind of like waiting and waiting and waiting, like you said, until his hand was forced. And it's the same thing with Chauncey Billups as coach. What's the argument for bringing Chauncey Billups back as coach, except it's not going to cost you more money to pay two coaches, right? Like, firing him would be more expensive. Like, I didn't see anything. I haven't seen anything from him to feel like, oh yeah, this guy's really, taking these young players to the next level. He's really got this clear vision. When I look at the best teams who have been in Portland's spot, they just have, I would say, different personality types as coaches. You look at like a Mark Daigneault in Oklahoma City, a Taylor Jenkins in Memphis, like they're just like G League grinders. You know what I mean? They can relate to their young players because they've put in these like 120-hour weeks. And Chauncey, to me, he's more of the kind of coach you would bring in to coach the Blazers when he was first hired, right? Can you get this guy, this team over the hump? Can he be the motivator? He's a Hall of Famer, all-star, champion. Can he squeeze something out of these guys, to help them in the big moments? I just think it's a very different task now with this younger group, and I don't know if really that's the type of coach that I would be wanting in this particular situation. But again, it just seems like, well, let's procrastinate. Let's bring him back next year. We can make the decision, even if he's going to be in a lame duck year, which you never see in the NBA anymore. You never see lame duck coaches, but Portland's just going to kind of walk into that. And if they get off to another slow start, it's going to put him in a terrible position as coach. So I feel for him as well. And again, this just kind of goes back to this idea of lack of vision, lack of, juice and push from the top, and everybody sitting around at that board meeting saying, is the boss going to show up, or are we just going to sit here and eat pizza and have lunch? Well, that sounds like fun too. It got no work done. They got no work done.
It does. It feels like a rudderless ship right now. Like there's just no direction. I couldn't agree more. The only other one I have for you, Ben, on them this last season, because it truly was kind of a lost year, right? I mean, Shaedon was kind of the big expectation. He goes down early. Don't see him again the rest of the season. Hey, let's see what Ant can do on his own as a number one. He plays 40-something games, and that's it. Scoot is buried on the depth chart early, finally gets healthy. He had a couple of nice games late, which was good, but kind of a lost season really for the guys that you were looking for. When you look at the logjam that they have at that position, can you make sense of it? Because I view it as Scoot was the number 3 pick. That's a guy you should likely build around. You traded Dame to draft him. Shaedon, they rave about. They refused to put him in trades last offseason. That should be your backcourt. Is there a fit for Anthony Simons, Brogdon? Like, it just seems like if this truly is a building process and a restart, shouldn't it be the number 3 and number 7 overall pick being your backcourt at least next season to see what you got?
Well, for sure. I mean, I think Brogdon's going to get traded, right? I mean, it was kind of a matter of when, not if. And then I look at Simons. I mean, he had a little comment. It wasn't spicy, but, something along the lines of he's ready to win too. So that's probably going to happen somewhere else. I do think eventually you need to have the handoff to Scoot and to Shade. And the tricky part is you need to know if Scoot can do it, right? Like it just did not happen this year. And you mentioned some of the challenging circumstances. He starts off the season playing off the ball a lot. It's like, why is he off the ball? Like this never was the plan, for a player like this. And so they must have determined he wasn't quite ready to take the car keys. Understandable, but still, you can't do that again next year. You got to get him back on the ball. And the other thing you've got to do, and it might not be possible this summer, you've got to open up the paint for Scoot. You've got to get him a center who's not hanging around those elbows and just kind of clogging things up and bringing a second defender. Because when you see a guard finish as poorly as Scoot, one, the game is probably just going a little bit too fast for him because he's young. But two, he's getting into traffic and he's being forced to take chances, right? And the easiest way to do that is to unclog the paint with a stretch center, right? So you look at Oklahoma City. Shea is a ridiculous finisher everywhere on the court, in part because Chet's not out there, right? So it's like there's just so much room to operate. He can break you down one-on-one off the dribble, and that's really what you have to do is you have to play to Scoot's skills if you want to get the best out of him. So for me, I'd be looking to try to get rid of Ayton ASAP and just take a different approach at the center spot because I think he's always going to – the style of his game, where he wants to be on the court, the kind of shots that Ayton wants to take – he's just always going to be in the way. The only way to get around it is to have an amazing pick and roll game between him and Scoot. And I'm optimistic that Scoot could kind of go that direction as a player, but I think it's a little bit harder than just, going one-on-one into space and trying to break your guy down and, drive and kick type passes. I feel like that's maybe a little bit more natural for Scoot at this point of his career. So they got some real lineup questions, not just the backcourt, right? It's like the fit between their key guys, their big salary guys. And I think unfortunately, I think that the book is out on Ayton. I don't think there was a lot of people looking around at his last 2 months and saying, oh, he's a changed man. He finally figured it out. And it's like, oh, yeah, it's DeAndre, same guy who had motivation issues at Phoenix. Looks like he has motivation issues in Portland, right? So that's, to me, one of the biggest challenges here. And it could be a while before they sort that. It could be another year of Scoot and Ayton. And even if Scoot takes a step forward, even if Ayton's more consistent, it still might not be good enough as a duo just because I don't know if those pieces quite fit. And it's hard to find stretch fives, so they don't grow on trees, right? You don't just get a Chet easily, but that's the kind of player you're going to need to really, bring Scoot up to the next level.
That's enough Blazer talk, I think, because, this team doesn't deserve a full podcast interview, Ben Golliver, on just them. The playoffs are here. I know we've got one more. We got some play-in things to settle. You were at Sacramento for maybe the end of the Curry, Clay, Draymond era. The Kings might get in as an 8 seed. I think of all the matchups in East-West for me, I think it's going to be a great playoff. It could end up with the two, Nuggets and Celtics, the two obvious favorites for everybody, and that's still a great finals. I'm most interested in Mavs Clips. I think there's some good matchups. Timberwolves Phoenix is very interesting, right? We got maybe the Lakers. I don't think they'll beat the Nuggets, but maybe, I guess. But Clips Mavs is interesting because the Clippers have kind of stumbled here at the end, and Luka and Kyrie really figured it out this year. They made the trade for the other guys. That's worked out really well. And I think Luka's generational. What's your read on Dallas and the Clippers? Is there another matchup you're more excited for in round one?
The fact that I'm here in LA and Luka and Joker fall in my lap for the first round, it's like, come on, bro. Like, did I design this? Like, we played 82 games and the play-in tournament and the in-season tournament, and we get Luka and Joker in LA. Give me a break. Couldn't have gone any better. I'm right there with you. The best part about the Clippers and Mavericks to me is the backstory, right? They've played twice previously. The Clippers won both times, but Luka, to me, was the best player on the court in both series, right? So I feel like Luka's one of these guys that just probably has like an assassination list. He's like, he's got his little hit list, right? He's like, I got to take this team out. Every time they play the Suns, he brings his A+ game, right? And the Clippers have got to be on that list, right? Because, he's lost to them twice previously. Both times were really frustrating. By the end of the second series, he's melting down about Rick Carlisle on the sideline, and Carlisle winds up leaving for the Pacers right afterwards. Like, that was a pretty dramatic loss. Luka is clearly going to be the best player in this series. There's no doubt about it. His chemistry with Kyrie Irving has been way, way better than I expected, especially recently. We should keep in mind Kyrie has this reputation as an amazing postseason player. He hasn't been that for 5 years. So if he could turn in one series and kind of flip that energy back around, it's going to be really, really tough for the Clippers. And I just look at them as a real soft target. Kawhi, 2 weeks. Where's he been? What's up with the knee? Who knows? James Harden, his numbers are just atrocious since the All-Star break. Don't look them up. It's like looking into the eclipse. You have to put glasses on. Look up Harden's post All-Star numbers. Make sure you do it like this. All right. So he's kind of a soft target as well for a team to try to take out. And what's been most impressive about Dallas is they made these mortgage your future trades at the trade deadline to get Gafford, to get PJ Washington. I didn't love the strategy, but it has paid off in the short term. They are much better defensively and chemistry-wise than they were before the trade deadline, and that's really been driving a lot of their success. And, you would love to be able to just pound the rim against the Clippers because they're so soft inside. That's one of their weak points defensively. And they've got Lively, they've got Gafford, who are these lob finishers, and Luka's just going to be throwing lobs to those guys over and over again. My prediction, I want to say Mavs in 5, but something always goes wrong with that. So I'll say Mavs in 6, but I'm expecting a great series, and I'm expecting signature Luka for sure.
Yeah, I'm stoked, Ben, for all these first-round series in the Western Conference. I think there's compelling storylines. We'll find out who they end up being the 8 seed, obviously, but all the other series that we know about, really interesting. The hard thing I have with it is it feels like Denver's so much better than everybody else. Do you have the same feeling? Like if you put money on it right now and I gave you Denver or the field, would it be easy Denver, conflicting? How do you feel about the West race?
Well, I'll take Denver just because I love Joker, but yeah, it's Denver or the field's a real question. Keep in mind the last 20 years, there's only been 3 teams to repeat as champions. It's crazy, but it's Kobe's Lakers, LeBron's Heatles, and then the Steph KD Warriors. Those are some pretty good teams. When I tell you about this year's Nuggets, they seem awesome, right? But we don't think about them on the same level as some of those other champions, at least not yet. Now, maybe they can earn that distinction by going through this playoffs, taking care of business, beating the Celtics in the finals, because Celtics cakewalking. I mean, they're going to be moonwalking, cakewalking, whatever. I mean, it's going to be so easy through the Eastern Conference for the Celtics. But, so Denver, they're going to have probably 4 tough series, honestly, to win it again. And that's where if Murray has some sort of a recurrence of his ankle injury, somebody else is missing time, they look a lot different. But when they're fully healthy, Joker just completely owns the sport. I think he's the best kind of puppet master, choreographer, chess master, whatever you want to call it, since peak LeBron James. And, I think at that point, you're talking about one of the greatest in NBA history for how he moves the people around him, how he dissects opposing defenses. And I think the big concern in this first round series against the Lakers for the Lakers is you saw it with LeBron in the fourth quarter against the Pelicans. Man, that guy ran out of gas. He was trying to play super hard to get into the play-in spot on Sunday night, which he did, and then turn back around a couple nights later and max out on defense and really expend all that energy. He just didn't have anything left in the fourth quarter, and Denver is a machine in late game scenarios. Joker is in incredible shape. They have such a great ability to know where each other are going, kind of, play a step ahead of the defense and then create good shots. I just think you're going to continue to see this pattern of the Nuggets take care of the Lakers in crunch time like they did in last year's Western Conference Finals and like they did in this year's regular season.
Milwaukee, certainly with some interesting decisions this year of hiring Griffin, and then you get Dame, and then you fire Griffin for the guy advising the team that was doing television that not everybody has the greatest thoughts of anymore, and it's not gone well. Giannis is hurt now. Dame seems like he's a little banged up, but they're not talking about it. Are they going to get out of round 1? And what can they do, I guess, if they get exited early, whether that's second round or round 1? What do they do at coach? Because that feels like an obvious, they're probably going to replace Doc and he's going to go back to doing television. What do you make of the Milwaukee situation?
Well, it's a classic problem, guys. Too many podcasters, Doc Rivers, Patrick Beverley, it's like, how are you going to win a title with podcasters? You're not. That's not going to work. That's actually one of my new rules for the NBA. Once you hit the stage where you have a podcast, you should no longer be able to be a max salary player, and that goes for LeBron, that goes for Draymond Green, it just goes for everybody. Like once you're hedging against your own future by having a podcast, like because you're worried, like, I got to figure out what my next chapter is, no longer a max player, you're out. So just keep that in mind if the Blazers make any moves for podcasters. So I actually think that they would run it back, and I think they would use this Giannis thing as an excuse, this injury. If they lose in the first round, they'll just say, oh, Giannis was hurt. What do you expect? Bad luck. Awful season, but we're going to come back with better chemistry next year. Couldn't be worse than this past year. And I think that would be a big mistake because Lillard's been the single biggest disappointment in the entire NBA this season. Full stop, period. No question about it. He has not fit with Giannis. They do not make each other better. It's sort of like a corporate merger where you have two companies trying to come together, and the new version just does, you don't know what your company stands for or what the name is. Everybody's arguing, right? Like kind of a Dunder Mifflin type situation. Like, it just sounds weird. That's been the Milwaukee Bucks. And then on defense, he's not guarding anybody. Malik Beasley's not guarding anybody. And it's just a layup line through their defense. And it's really sad to see because what I always loved about the Bucks, man, they used to get down in their defensive stance. All five guys would be so hard to score. And even last year with Drew Holiday and those guys, they just would really be able to crank it up. Even during the regular season, the consistency just hasn't been there for them. Now, they're going to get a team that plays no defense in the first round, the Indiana Pacers. And I don't think there's really anybody in the East you should be scared of besides Boston. But I think if you're Milwaukee, what you're really trying to do here is save face. If you could just buy time, get Giannis back, hope he's the best player on the court, get to the conference finals, that's like the best case scenario for that team. And that's not what we thought coming into this season. I mean, there's no doubt it's been a real letdown, a real drag, and they don't seem like they're having fun. I guess the thing to keep an eye on would be is did Lillard have enough? Did he just decide this really wasn't where I was supposed to land? And would he try to figure out somewhere else to go? I think that's something I guess you have to keep an eye on just because it's been such a disaster. But, there aren't that many places that give you a better chance to win than Milwaukee either. So, there is a case for let's run it back, try. Maybe year two will be a little bit better. But, to me, Lillard's just not that all-NBA first team, second team level guy. And if he's not, they don't have enough.
Yeah, it's been such a fascinating year to follow with them because when he went there, it felt like it was a foregone conclusion. They're going to dominate those two guys. I mean, what a great tandem. That's what we're building NBA teams around now. And it just has not worked at all.
Well, here's the thing, though. And if I was Joe Cronin or one of his subordinates or, assistants or whatever, I would be getting out this talking point. The Blazers traded Lillard at the perfect time, period. They didn't maybe get the perfect, return. It's not like they've got a million draft picks. You're going to have to wait a long time for those pick swaps. Those pick swaps are going to be pretty good. And those picks are going to be swapping. There's no question about it once Portland gets to that stage, right? Or once Milwaukee gets to that stage. But, I mean, Lillard, it's been a mess. It has not been good. And I think it would have been significantly harder to trade him this upcoming summer than it was this past summer. And so, yes, he did, drag his feet a little bit. It was weird messaging beforehand. But the fact that they did pull the trigger right before Dame kind of fell off a cliff this season, I mean, you got to give Portland credit for that.
The last one I got for you, Ben, and then we'll let you go. To come back full circle, I know you were at the Hoop Summit getting ready, checking out Cooper Flagg, and some of that stuff's a year in advance, right? So we got to tank next year. We got to draft this summer too. So I don't know how plugged in you are to the draft class, and everything that we're hearing is one of the worst at GMs and people have ever seen. We know Portland's likely going to end up with a top 5 pick. This will probably be the year that we get number 1, and it'll be a bust. And then next year we'll fall down to like number 6 or 7. Anything you know about this class? Any feelings? Any opinions? What have people been telling you? Because I don't know much about it. I don't recognize half the names. Everybody just tells me that it sucks.
Yeah, it's really tough. I mean, usually the classes get kind of labeled by who the best player is, right? Or maybe best 2 players. And this year, there's just not really those big standout names that get you super excited. The guy who I like the most, arguably, is probably Reed Sheppard from Kentucky, and he's a guard. And if you're Portland,
right up Portland's alley.
Right, and you're going to say, well, do you just draft best player available, draft position for need? I mean, I think he would be the best player available, but then it gets into this whole logjam situation. So potentially you could go that route and trade Simons, right? And then it's like, hey, we're going to go even younger. And, then you're fighting between him and Sharp for minutes. I don't know. That could get tricky. But the analytics really love Sheppard. And, eye test is impressive. He did not have a very good or a very long NCAA tournament run at Kentucky, so not a ton of tape there. But very smart, great shooter, good intangibles, just a good all-around player, good defensive intensity. The foreign players, it's tricky because like Alex Sarr, I'd be real hesitant to draft a non-shooting, non-playmaking big. Like look at Evan Mobley right now, right? He's like sort of came in all defense, defensive player of the year reputation, but he can't do a thing with the basketball, right? He can't shoot it from anywhere, basically outside of 2 feet. and he's constantly creating lineup problems in Cleveland, right? And I'm not surprised at all you guys didn't want to break down the Cavs Magic series because they're boring and not fun to watch, and they're kind of a mess, right? So it's like, yeah, do you want to be that team? Probably not. And so it's harder to get really excited about a guy, even if he's this amazing, versatile defensive player like Sarr is, when you know how important playmaking and scoring from that big position is, right? It's like, hey, he's like Joker on offense, except the exact opposite in every way. Well, great. That's who you want to take with the number 1 pick? Probably not, right? So, yeah, other than that, the 4 players, Reese Shea is kind of a shooter type, and he could be a spacer. You would love to get him at like 8, and maybe he goes 2. So it's like, well, that tells you kind of how bad the class is. So that's why everybody's put so much onto, next year's class for sure. The headliner is just much more interesting players with, I think, higher ceilings. And, this year's class, it's more about, look, if even if you're not going to get a superstar level guy, can you just get a 10-year pro who wants to be in your program and wants to help, right? Can you just take a step? This is an opportunity. Don't overlook it, right? You've been spending all year building up towards it. You've lost a lot of games this year to have some sort of a payoff. So obviously you still have to take the evaluation process seriously. I just think it's important for fans to have lowered expectations, right?
Yeah, find a 10-year vet. I think we'd be okay with that. Ben Golliver, you can read him in the Washington Post, the author of Bubble Ball, the host of the Greatest of All Talk podcast, one of our favorites, a Portland legend. Keep killing it, dude. Thanks for doing this, jumping on the YouTube with us. We really appreciate it. Enjoy the NBA playoffs, and let's catch up again soon.
Fly the flag, my guys. Do it. I'm telling you.